Welcome. In this explainer, we're going to tackle a really fundamental question in business law. What exactly is a company? We'll be using India's Companies Act of 2013 as our guide to see how the law actually creates and thinks about these incredibly powerful economic engines. So, here's what we've got on the agenda. We'll kick things off with the main rulebook for companies. Then we'll try to pin down what a company legally is. After that, we'll dive into the absolute core concept, the separate legal entity. We'll also cover its other key features, and then wrap it all up with the most important takeaways. All right, first things first, let's talk about the rulebook. You see, every single company in India has to operate according to the rules laid out in the Companies Act of 2013. This law is really the bedrock for everything else we're going to discuss. Now, you might think this was just a little tweak, but no way. This act was a complete overhaul of the old 1956 version. The economy both in India and globally had changed so much. The whole point was to modernize everything, to improve how companies are governed, make the regulations simpler, and give investors better protection. Okay, so who exactly has to follow these rules? Well, the short answer is pretty much everyone. Its reach is huge. We're talking about standard companies, of course, but also specialized ones like insurance and banking, companies that generate our electricity, and even other corporate bodies that the government says are included. You can really think of it as the central nervous system for all corporate law in the country. All right, let's get to the real head-scratcher here. When the law uses the word company, what does it actually mean? It sounds like a simple question, but the legal answer is pretty mind-bending and honestly kind of fascinating. And, this classic quote from Chief Justice Marshall just hits the nail on the head. A company isn't something you can physically touch or see. It's a concept, a legal creation that only exists because a piece of paper, the law, says it does. It's an idea brought to life. And this is where it gets really interesting. On one side, you've got Professor Haney, who gives us a great description by listing a company's features. But then you look at the actual law, and the legal definition is, well, kind of useless on its own. It basically says a company is a company. Thanks for nothing, right? This tells us that to really get it, we have to do what Professor Haney did and look at its characteristics. And that brings us to the single most important idea in all of corporate law. Seriously, if you take away just one thing today, let it be this. A company is what's called a separate legal entity. This is the absolute foundation that everything else is built on. So what does that mean? It means the law treats a company like its own person, totally distinct from the people who own it, the shareholders. The company can own a building, it can have its own bank account, it can sign a contract, all in its own name. It's not the same as its owners. Look, theory is one thing, but a real-life story really drives the point home. And there's no better example than the famous Macora case. It shows just how seriously the law takes this idea of separation between an owner and their company. So picture this. You've got a guy, Mr. Macora. He owns a timber company and basically all of the shares. He decides to insure the timber, but he makes a critical mistake. He takes out the policy in his own name, not the company's name. Then disaster strikes. A fire burns all the timber down. When he tried to claim the insurance, the court said no. Why? Because Mr. Macora and his company were two different legal persons. The timber belonged to the company, so he had no legal right to insure it himself. So, you see, the ripple effects of this one idea are absolutely massive. The company owns its own assets. It can sue someone or be sued in its own name. The owners can even sign contracts with the company they own. And maybe most importantly, the company's debts are its own problem, not the personal problem of its owners. And that leads us perfectly into its other key features. All right, so if a company is its own separate person, what else can it do? Well, this core idea gives it some pretty cool legal superpowers, which is a great way to think about these characteristics. First up, think of a company as being basically immortal. This is called perpetual succession. It means that the owners can come and go, they can sell their shares, they can even pass away, but the company itself just keeps on existing. The only thing that can kill a company is a formal legal process. And if you think that's just a theory, get this. There was a real case where all 7 members of a private company died together in a plane crash. So, did the company die with them? Nope, because the company is its own legal person. It continued to exist, even though every single one of its owners was gone in an instant. Okay, this next one is a huge deal, and it's probably a big reason you might start a company yourself. It's called limited liability. In simple terms, it means if the company racks up huge debts, the creditors can't come after the personal assets of the owners. Your house, your car, your personal savings, they're safe. You're only on the hook for whatever you invested in your shares. It's a massive protection that encourages people to invest and take risks. So we keep calling it an artificial person. It's created by law, right? Not born. And because it's not a real human being with a brain and hands, it needs actual people, we call them directors, to be its agents, to make decisions and act on its behalf. And this is a great way to think about it. What can this artificial person do, and what can't it do? Well, it can do almost anything a real person can do in business: buy property, borrow money, go to court. But it can't do things that require a body or a soul. It can't get married, it can't be a doctor, and you can't throw a company in jail. So, how does an artificial person sign a contract? Well, for the longest time, the answer was something called a common seal. It was basically an official stamp, the company's formal signature. But let's be honest, in the modern world, that's a bit of an ancient concept. And so, things have moved on. As of 2015, that clunky seal is totally optional. If a company doesn't have one, it can make a document official with the signatures of 2 directors or 1 director plus the company's secretary. It's just a much more practical and modern way of doing things. Okay, phew, we have gone through a lot. So let's take a breath and boil it all down to the key things you absolutely need to remember. This is the stuff that really matters. So think of it like this. This is the company's DNA. 1, it's a separate legal entity. 2, it has perpetual succession, meaning it's immortal. 3, it offers limited liability to protect its owners. 4, it's an artificial person created by law. And 5, its official signature, the common seal, is now optional. These 5 characteristics are what make a company, well, a company. And that brings me to my final question for you, a really big one to think about. This whole massive, complex world of corporations all comes down to one simple legal trick: creating an artificial person with its own identity. So the question is, how does that one powerful idea shape the entire modern economy as we know it? It's a huge concept, right? And it really is the engine of our economy. Anyway, that's it for me for this explainer on what a company is. Thanks so much for joining me, and I really hope you have a clear understanding now of this absolute cornerstone of the business world.